Good afternoon. We're going to call the Justice and Public Safety Committee to order. The second item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda? Moved by Duje, supported by Carabelli. Is there any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor? Please vote on your iPad. Good. The agenda is adopted. The next item on the agenda is public participation. Are there any members of the public who wish to address this committee? Seeing none, we'll close public participation and move to the department recommendations. Oh, we'll back up to item number 4. Commissioner Carabelli is making a motion to approve the minutes of February 7th. Is there support? Support by Lucido. Any discussion? All those in favor, please vote on your iPads. Item 6, the budget amendment, the capital improvement fund, the jail bed replacement contract. And we have some members from the Sheriff's Department to speak on this.
Yes.
Good
Captain
afternoon.
Zimney, Sheriff's Office, Jail Administrator. The Sheriff's Office is recommending or seeking acceptance to a bid acceptance and budget amendment for the bed replacement project for the jail tower facility. It's 840 beds. We're seeking approval of the contract to Cornerstone Construction, Cornerstone Detention, for the amount of $887,000 for replacement of 840 bed bunks.
Commissioner Kleinfeld, did you have a question? But my thing won't let me ask. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I was looking at the bid sheet, and I was real curious about the unit price 1A and 1B, the whatever it is per BKT. So I'm looking at 400, 400, 500, 400, and then this we have 30. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
Very curious about that because it seemed unrealistic to me that they were bidding on the same thing.
It is. It was brought to our attention as well, and that was clarified through Wakely Architectural Firm. The vetting of this contractor was done through Wakely, and that question was brought up, and comparables were made, and assurances were delivered to Wakely saying that the product would be the same, even though the cost was significantly less.
So what is BKT? Is that like the bed unit, per bed unit?
I think that's bracket, actually.
Yeah.
Oh,
Bracket.
per bracket. Okay. Because that was my other confusion is that it indicated the difference, and I don't know where that is on here. The difference was a certain amount, and it seemed to me it would be even a lot more if those bids were 10 times higher than that bid, then the total bid amount would be 10 times higher. But because it's just the bracket, not the bed itself, I'm wondering, do you really think that the other companies would be charging $500 and $400 per bracket?
Well, Commissioner, the entire bid by Cornerstone Detention was nearly $500,000 less than the next competitive bid on this project. It's my understanding that Cornerstone Detention is a large nationwide facility or organization, and their ability to purchase and manufacture and deliver steel is significantly less expensive than the other competitive bidders in this project. Again, that was vetted by Wakely and their architect, Ron Syme.
Yeah, and I don't have any problem with them. I just my thought process was that the other companies didn't understand what they were bidding on, because I just, even if this is all you do, being able to charge $30 as opposed to $565, that's such a significant difference that there's something wrong there.
Well, we just thought just the opposite, that the other ones, possibly Cornerstone, was somehow confused about the
Right.
the product, because their bid was different. I mean, unless that's what you were implying.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Probably.
Somebody was confused, and you said
Sure.
that Wakely checked with them, so if they're not confused, then the others must
They
have been.
guarantee this. They're following the specs that were outlined in the bid proposal.
Okay,
or the
that,
RFP.
then that suggests, and I'm gonna support this, but that suggests that the other companies were confused about what they were bidding on, because there's
Possibly.
just no way, you know.
Possibly.
That doesn't mean I won't support this, but, something went wrong there, so, thank you.
Commissioner Carabelli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, sir. I got a couple of questions here, and maybe I'm confusing the two items. First of all, the question I have to ask is, with the project that the sheriff's office is currently working on for improvements to the facility that's ongoing, he's in the process of, is this something that, the first question would be, should be held off, or is this something that you know is going to fit in with the plans he has for the future?
Well, the plans for the future, my understanding, and not trying to speak for Sheriff Wickersham, is that the tower structure will remain. There are no plans to demo or to graveyard that portion of the jail facility right now. And with that in mind, and the acknowledged liability that we have in the recent years with what the bed, the bunks portray us,
Correct.
that's something we need to move forward on.
Okay, then my next question is, because of that liability, and again, I'm asking because I don't know, so bear with me, and I apologize if I'm saying the wrong thing. Is this not something that we can weld? Is this,
We went that whole route to patch, weld, to look at any other avenues of repairing this, and it was determined by the architects that the most effective, cost-effective, and efficient and permanent solution was this process of replacing the trays, the bunk trays themselves. We looked at epoxy, looked at welding plate, a number of different avenues, and this was the best solution and the most cost-effective.
okay, then the next question would be for the finance director, if he's still here and available. This was not a budgeted item, correct?
Yeah, this was not included in the capital plan
Okay.
for 2018.
Okay, so we look to, on the approval of this, Madam Chair, if I'm correct, this will go on to finance the full board, and this will also be a budget amendment at the same time. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's a supplemental or a companion motion here to approve the budget amendment as well.
Okay, so I'm requesting now that the capital fund of this is coming out to see the dollars that are in there prior to finance or full board, and what's going to be left in there after we make these budget adjustments, what projects we're not going to be doing now that was budgeted for of taking these funds out. So I'd like to see what the impact is countywide of making this budget adjustment. So I have no problem, voting on this today, but prior to finance or full board, I need to see the bigger picture of where are we at as far as that money, where it's coming from, and what's not going to happen, if that's fair.
Gotcha.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Did you get all his questions that he wants? Commissioner Leonetti?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know we talked briefly just a moment before the meeting, but I want to make it clear. I know the sheriff is going to be coming in and giving us some plans to redesign the jail or add to the jail. What I don't want to have happen is we get these beds, we put them in, and then suddenly we tear them out because of the redesign. These beds that we're going to be putting in, are they going to be implemented in the new designs, if you know?
The new design does not affect the tower structure of the jail complex.
Okay.
That has always been a facility or a fixture that wasn't going to be touched in the reconstruction of the jail area. So
Okay.
that kind of answers your question.
Okay, great, thank you very much, appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Drollet?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. How many beds again was it that we?
840.
All right, so it's 887,000 divided by. So it's about a little over $1,000 a bed.
Correct.
What is a bracket exactly?
The bracket is just the material that the tray sits on. It's
Okay.
fastened into the walls, and it's custom made for the tray.
And so there's one bed per bracket.
There are 4 brackets per bed in some installation process. Some of there's only 2, depending on how the wall structure is.
I see. What would be the consequence if we didn't do anything?
If we didn't do anything,
Yeah, in the next year.
okay, then there's a significant risk of continued attempt suicide utilizing the holes in the bunks to facilitate that act.
Okay, and that's something that we've had an ongoing problem with currently.
Yes, we had 3 completed suicides using this method last year.
Okay.
And we had 5, actually, I misspoke, we have 10 attempts in the last 5 years using this method.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Brown?
How is it we just didn't get in the capital plan? It was just dawned on someone that we're gonna need $800,000 for these beds? I mean, well, maybe, it's probably over your pay level, but, Steve, I mean, didn't,
I believe there's been discussions about what to do about this particular problem for a long time. I don't know how far preceding when we submitted the capital plan last year, but as Captain Zimney indicated, there were a number of moving parts. We're going to use epoxy, we're going to do this or that. So we didn't really know what it was going to cost until at this point in time. We just went through the bid
so really,
process.
this is based on another decision about whether this is a preventative enough measure to stop the problem that you thought was happening because of these beds. I mean, is it a fact, or is it just is it a hope that this is going to correct the problem?
Well, there's no, can I speak?
Yep.
Yeah, please.
There's no permanent solution because one's ability or one's determination to commit suicide is very focused. And we know for a fact, last year we had 3 successful suicides in 90 days. And then we had a couple attempts that follow that using the same means. Certainly, if we eliminate the holes in the bunks, considering we've had 10 attempts and 3 successful, that's 13 events in the last 5 years, there's just an inherent liability attached to each one of those. So if we were to do nothing, then we would continue with that liability.
Well, take reasonable precautions, I understand, but explain to me how these holes, how big are these holes? Are they?
I do actually have some pictures of the bunks and the holes if you'd like to see them.
Yes.
Sure. The holes are just shy of an inch in diameter.
Thank you, friend. So where do they get the rope from?
You know, it wasn't rope. They can use a number of avenues. What we were finding that they were utilizing the sheets that we provided for them. So shortly after the 3 successful suicides and the attempts, we eliminated the sheets and then we issued them an additional blanket. But that in itself doesn't totally negate the fact that they can't do it because we've had, historically in the past, we've seen them use their pant legs, their uniform pants, to feed through the hose to tie a knot and commit suicide or attempt suicide. So as much as we want to say that by repairing these holes, repairing the trays, we're going to eliminate suicide, we're not, because they'll probably move to some other means or avenue, but this is a very common factor that we see present in numerous occasions.
What's the material the existing bed made out of?
Steel, plate steel.
So why don't we just get a TIG welder and weld them shut?
We
Here.
talked about that in the labor intense, and we have mattresses. You can't just weld them because you would have to plate them. You would have sharp edges. You would destroy the mattresses. And there's also an issue about power for the tower. We're not sure if we have enough power to have all those welders running up at the tower. So the thought was to replace the tray as being the most economical way. It's less labor intense. You would just weld into the new black brackets and move on to the next one.
It's less expensive than $800,000.
Yes. Yes.
800 beds.
840 beds, correct.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question through Mr. Schmiegel. So, we don't have this item is not budgeted for, so where are we going to get the money from this? It's going to come out of capital projects?
Yeah, ultimately, it's going to come from the general fund balance. So as you know, there was no funding put in place for the 2018 capital plan, so
Okay.
we have to come back before you for every project. This was not on the original capital plan.
Point of information, wasn't there 13 million, I'm sorry, wasn't there 13 million left in that capital projects fund at the end of the year?
That was our estimate. I don't have that yet closed. I will tell you that of the 13 million that we estimate it's going to be remaining and rolling forward from 2017, a good portion of that's going to be utilized to complete the central campus project and other projects that
Okay, I
F&O
just wanted,
needs.
I
This
just
is-
wanted to make clear what you were saying, that, just to make clear, there was 13 million left over to carry on with these projects.
Right, that's going to be
and then
spoken for.
move it.
This will be
Okay,
a new request.
Got it.
For fund balance utilization.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schmiegel.
Thank you. Steve, I just have a question for you, just kind of to follow up with that, now that I'm in the right order. So this is going to be a new request. However, we haven't seen the 13 million that was left in there, how that's being or been spent. Because to me, that 13 million, whatever project comes up first, is what that should be used on. And then as it starts to get to the point where we don't have that money left is when you should probably be coming to us for new money. I wouldn't expect that you'd be coming to us for new money unless you are telling me that that money is already spoken for and basically spent.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, at some point in time during the course of this year, we'll be coming to you for another $887,000. We're doing it now in conjunction with this particular project because this is sort of an emergency need, if you will. So one way or the other, we'll come to you for another $887,000. Just do it and connect it specifically to this project because it wasn't on the capital plan.
Okay.
That's the thought. And
Okay, and just so you say, my thought, and I'm not sure about the other commissioners, so I'm just speaking for me, is that we would be using that 13 million down before we came for new money out of the general fund for projects. So, and we'll talk about this offline. I just want to tell you that was kind of at least my idea on how this money that was left over, so that we didn't have any issues with things that needed to be done like that. $887,000 seems like it might be able to come out of that for an emergency
not
type
to
of
put
thing.
words in your mouth, I think what you're driving at is what Commissioner Carabelli was asking for previously. Here's the 13 million. It's going to be spent on this project, project A, B, C, D. It's kind of the timing where this is all going to land. I think that's where you're getting
Okay,
at.
and then I'd like to talk to you a little more offline if you
And
don't
I
mind.
apologize for misspeaking. The sound as if the commissioners didn't fund the capital plan. I know there was that rollover money. I just want to apologize for that.
And I guess I have to figure out too what everybody else's idea on what that was, because to me, even though it's kind of spoken for down the line and later on this year, to go for the new money early seems premature, I guess. And this has nothing to do with you. I'm just saying that the money should come from the money that's already in that fund,
Yeah, I mean, as I
rather
said-
than asking for new money to come into that fund.
This
Because
is new.
I understand,
as
but there's a
it's-
lot of
It was new to the capital plan, put it that
right.
way.
And there's a lot of things that come up new in the
Yeah.
capital fund.
Right.
That's kind of expected.
Right.
So, all right, thanks.
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One or the other. Something's goofy about these numbers. If there's 4 brackets per bed, then that's $200 per bed if it's 1B, or is it 1A and 1B, 2 of each, or however this, somehow I can't come up with $887,000.
Well, that's just for the bracket. That includes the steel for the bunks or the labor involved.
Oh, okay, so the 887, the brackets plus the steel, plus the labor.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, I would have liked to see a better breakdown of this, but that being said, I'm sure you have it. I'd be interested in seeing it after everything's said and done.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 2 quick questions. The first one's for you. Is there anything structurally wrong with these beds except for fixing these holes that are there? So they're all pretty structurally sound. They serve their purpose.
Correct.
Okay. My next question, I think, is for Mr. Shapka. In terms of liability, in terms of lawsuits, when inmates commit suicide, what's...
In terms of liability and lawsuits, if this problem is not fixed immediately, there's certain liability running directly to the county. Under more Supreme Court cases than I can cite to right now, once the county is aware of a problem, a widespread problem, which this certainly is, and we certainly are aware, if the county turns a blind eye to it, the county is directly responsible. And that is absolute certain liability. There wouldn't even be much of a fight that we could put up.
But if the inmates are going to continue to commit suicide by other means, this is just one possible way to do it.
This is probably the most popular right now, and probably the most common. It's for your average prisoner who's a very resourceful guy, this is the most obvious solution to their perceived problem. And the best we can do, as Captain Zimney said, is we address every problem as we encounter it and just keep limiting their options and limiting their options, limiting their options. We can't take the uniforms away. The Supreme Court says we have to clothe them. We don't have overhead pipes. We're taking away essentially the functional equivalent of overhead piping, taking away the means, the noosing material. Now they get blankets that can be rolled up, maybe so big around it's a nice turtleneck, but it won't strangle you. They will think of the next step, and then we have to counter that next step. For right now, this is a very serious problem. As Captain Zimney said, we had 3 last year and 10 attempts using this particular methodology. No one could stand up in front of a judge or jury and say, gee, the county didn't know.
And what's the cost to the county for that?
Potentially, with an in-custody death, potentially 1.5 to 3 million each, depending on unique factors for each case and each individual.
Okay.
What did that cost us in the past?
In the past, the hanging lawsuits have not been against the county itself. They've been against the individual deputies. And those are very difficult to win for a plaintiff because unless a deputy stands there and watches, the deputy can't be deliberately indifferent, the legal standard of conduct. The standard for the county is completely different. The law applying to the county is different than that applying to the deputies. Knowing of the problem, if the county chose to do nothing, it's the classic, you were aware of the problem, you turned a blind eye. Now it is the county having a policy and a practice of allowing this to happen.
Okay.
That's where the certainty comes from.
Okay.
Deputies, as I said, individual liability, completely different. It's much harder to pin this on an individual. What did the individual do to make this happen?
Okay. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and maybe Steve can help on this bid tabulation sheet. So what I did was I took the 30 and I times it by the 4 times 840. So I get 100,800. So if that's the cost of the brackets, then the rest of the project, the rest of the supplies and the labor and everything would be 786,000 to get to the 887, because this 887 includes the cost of the brackets, correct? Because that's what you're asking of us.
I I wasn't involved in the bid process, so the math.
But you have the bid in front of you.
I have the bid in front of me, but.
Okay, so you do know that they're asking for the 887. They're not asking for that plus a dollar amount for the brackets.
Well,
They're not
Yeah.
in their request to us.
no, the 887.
It's all inclusive.
It's inclusive.
Yeah.
Okay, so herein is my question with respect to the numbers. So if you take the first one and you take 472,000 and you times that by 4 and then times it by 840, you get 1,585,000 and some change, which means that that's what they're charging for the brackets, almost 1.6 million, which means all of the labor and all of the other material they're only charging 179,000 for, as opposed to Cornerstone, which is charging 786. Now, if you take the second number for Burnco, the 565, and times that by 4 times 840, you get 1,898,000, which is actually higher than their base bid. So if this bid sheet is correct, Burnco is going to do the job and then write us a check back for 133,400.
I think can I interrupt?
Yeah.
There are two different brackets involved, so you can't, there's a bracket 1B and a bracket 1A.
Yes.
So it would be a total of those two. For the certain bracket, the cost per bracket is more than the other. And I don't have the breakdown between how many in the 840 are bracket B and how many are the 840 are bracket B.
But it would apply to all the companies. However many brackets are A and ever many brackets are B, both companies would be calculating those same numbers. So what I did was I just said, let's say they're all A, and then let's say they're all B. They can be any mixture of the two. However Burnco would be calculating it, if it were the same as the way Cornerstone is calculating it, then this base bid, if it includes that number, Cornerstone would be saying all the labor and everything else, we're going to charge you 786,000 for, and Burnco would be saying all the labor and all the other material, we're going to charge you 179,000 for. It goes the opposite direction with both companies are using the same amount of A brackets and the same amount of B brackets, correct?
I would assume yes, it would happen.
Okay. Steve, do you see what I'm...
Well, what had happened though, it was truly concerning to us that Cornerstone came in $500,000 less than the other three bids. And so with that, we raised the issue with Lynn Arnott and Ron Simon as to how can that possibly be. So through continued vetting by Ron Simon from Wakely, they provided us with guarantees that they were providing, or they were going to do the same exact job or labor or bed replacement at that cost as everybody else for $500,000 less.
I don't disagree with you. What I think is that the other bids should be coming in at a lot lower, because there's no way they're charging 565 or 472 for brackets, and you times that by 4, and that the entire rest, everybody else gave you bids based on different information, so we don't know what their bids are. Does that, he went to Cornerstone. He didn't go to the others and say, why on earth were your brackets?
But the bid spec was all the same. So, and I'm not a construction person, nor am I an accountant, but all I understand is the fact that the bid spec outlined exactly what was needed for the project, and Cornerstone came up with a bid that was significantly lower. So it was our understanding that either their profit margin for this project was significantly less, and they assumed that for whatever reason, and that's why the other three bids are so much more.
Yeah, and I think what I was thinking is if this is all they do, maybe they could do it for cheaper. But as I started calculating the numbers, I knew it's not possible. It's not possible that the other companies are just charging that for the brackets. It cannot be possible that that's what their intent was on there.
It seems odd that the other three come in fairly close to one another. And just Cornerstone is the one who comes in significantly less. So that strikes me very odd. But,
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for answering a few more questions. This was described by Steve as an emergency situation. I think our attorney sort of outlined why it is. It may be considered an emergency situation. I guess that my question then is to Mr. Schmiegel. Are there things then in the capital outlay budget that are being looked at that are lesser of emergencies that we can then drop off the list and put off into the future if we add some emergency things on? I'm sure you don't have the entire list of
No, I don't have the
projects.
entire list.
I'm sure they're all needed in some capacity.
They will
but-
be needed during the course of the year. And we're trying to be proactive to get the budget amendment early as opposed to coming back later. We're trying to.
So there's nothing that can be postponed for an additional year. We can squeeze another year out of a heating and cooling
We're
system.
looking at that now, and that kind of goes back to what Commissioner Carabelli was asking about earlier. There's a number of things on that list that could potentially be pushed away. But there are some other capital needs out there that certainly are not necessarily as of an emergent need as this, but will need to be addressed concerning HVAC units and things of that nature.
So in your opinion, is this one of the top needs? If you were to rank the capital project needs, would this be one of the top ones in your mind?
In my mind, without having the whole list in front of me, yes, only because of the liability exposure.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I mean, you have three suicides in 1 year alone, and so we try to set up reserves for those. But I mean, in terms of liability risk, this certainly is up in the top tier.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So I just have one question and one comment. What's the size of these bunks?
well, they're about 3 feet by 6 feet.
3 by 6? Okay.
Yeah, roughly.
And so, I know this is kind of our one chance really to talk about this. This is a lot of money, it seems like, for what's going on. So, I mean, I'm sorry, we're not beating you up on this, and I feel bad. I know how the old commission used to know how to do everybody's job better than they knew how to do it. Oh, except for a few of you that were here. But my question is this. When we go out for bid, do we tell them that we need this replaced? Do we say we need this fixed? Do we say how they're going to do it, or do we kind of leave it out in the open and let them come back with the best case fix? So that being said, I realize we need to do this based on liability, so I'm not against it. I'm just it's kind of a head scratcher, right? I mean, if you look at cutting a 3 by 6 piece of 1/4 inch, steel, and with the new epoxies that are out nowadays, just gluing that or tacking it in place, whatever it might be, it seems like there's so many other ways to go about this from, sitting up here. So I don't know if you guys had actually, if the bid goes out specifically, this is what we need replaced, or is this, we need this fixed, it needs to be like this, you tell us.
And I'll try to speak as best as I can. Again, I'm not a contractor.
Right.
In reference to the first part of your question, whether or not other means or avenues could have been utilized to address this issue, that was kind of referred back to F&O and to Wakely, the architect, to come up with a possibility of an alternate fix for the project. They looked at epoxies. They met with different representatives. They talked about the plate steel. There was some concern about transporting this plate steel into the facility, whether or not structurally it could hold all that, adding additional plate steel to the current plate steel. Foundation-wise, there were a number of things that were looked at, whether or not that was a viable alternative to replacing the bunks.
Okay.
So through all that conversation between the architect and F&O, it was determined that cost-effectively, this route was the best way to do it. So when the bid went out, it was to replace the bunk. It wasn't to find alternative measures of
Got it.
attempting to resolve the problem.
Great. And that's a great way of explaining this, because we don't see that process, right? We just get to $887,000, almost $1 million to do something where we're all going, man, I would do, I could think of different ways, but to explain that this is looked at by the architects and that you guys have had, discussions which you don't even think about, right? The weight on the floors and everything like that. That's kind of what I wanted to hear from you. So thank you. That's good.
And we looked at long-term solvability for a problem. And as much as we've come in advancements with epoxies and different methods of possibly filling those holes,
And I
there's
wasn't
no
asking
guarantee.
about filling them with epoxy. I was saying, but that plate steel could be easily glued down to a point where you would never get that out of there with a crowbar if you had one. So that was my point, not filling the holes necessarily with epoxy. But nonetheless, the way you explained it at least satisfied some of our concerns and at least my concerns and questions on how it gets to that point. And so thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was looking at the vetting letter from Wakely. And I know you'd mentioned that Cornerstone was able to come in on a lower bid because apparently they're a big enough operation that they apparently can buy steel maybe at a discounted rate or something like that.
That's my understanding.
Okay. When you look at the vetting letter, they say something about Cornerstone having specialized material. And I am a little bit concerned with what Commissioner Kleinfeld said. When you look at the bids on that Excel spreadsheet, I mean, the other companies are indicating $456 and $532 for brackets. And here we've got Cornerstone saying $30 and $50. I'm sure in the process of vetting it that we're not getting some kind of cheap material for these brackets, that these brackets are the same, the appropriate design for these beds, and they're not made out of some rincy-dincy steel, that if you know.
Commissioner, we totally agree. I mean, it was, like I said initially, we're really concerned about having a bid come in that much lower. But the spec in the RFP was very defined as to the thickness and the gauge of the steel and all that, and Cornerstone has to meet that spec.
Okay.
They don't have the ability to deviate from the spec. They have to meet the spec.
Okay.
And that's why we continue to vet them further to make sure that there was no misunderstanding between the plate steel, the paint that goes on it, which is Tanemic. It's a very expensive paint product. We wanted to make sure that they were supplying all the things that were outlined in that RFP, and they did agree to that, and they provided documentation for that.
Okay.
And getting back to Commissioner Kleinfeld's concern, like I said, we are very concerned about coming in that much cheaper. Where was the error? I don't know, but we have 3 that are real close and one that's significantly less. The bottom line is Cornerstone Detention is a huge organization. It's based out of Alabama. They do work throughout the country. They're not some small entity. They have a regional office here in Washington Township, and they vet it out.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I guess John could answer this. One lawsuit could take care of this thing. You don't have to. One half, yeah. And that goes back to how many times I've mentioned some of the commissioners have gone over there, but now you got a chance to go see what he's talking about. The next time you have a chance to go over here at 43565 Elizabeth, take a look at this and you'll know what he's talking about. And we can set up here as building inspectors and contractors, but that's your problem. That's what you want to get fixed, and it's our problem to say yes. Okay? Thank you.
Who gets all the 840 beds, the ones that are being taken out?
Oh, we staged that process.
No, but who gets the final product when it's out? Who gets the scrap metal when it's left
There is
over?
I don't, that's a good question. I don't have an answer, Commissioner.
Is it in there? I didn't see it. Well, but I mean, there's some money there. I mean, maybe that's how they're making their money back. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I wish I had some for my kids when they were younger.
Are you done, Commissioner?
Thank you.
I just didn't. So I don't have any more questions. This is just a comment, and this is for you know, the commissioners and people that might think that we shouldn't come up here and ask questions when we're signing a $887,000, you know, new project that at least gives some people concerns where you at least have to ask questions. So I don't think anybody's for getting sued or for anybody hanging each other or not for fixing this. And I'll just say, Commissioner Sauger, everybody's for this, but to not ask questions, our job is not just to come up and say yes automatically when people come in front of us. So I think these questions are all generally well thought out, and I'm sure, and you've answered most of them, if not all of them, thoroughly, so I appreciate that. I just want to point out that our job isn't just to say yes on these things without asking questions.
I don't think I said you have to do whatever they want. Go over and see it. Go over and see it. Yeah. And like John said, one lawsuit will take care of it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One final question on how long is this switching going to take? Have you got some time frame in mind?
We have another project that's going on currently within the jail. We're replacing showers in that same tower facility.
Okay.
And there's also an improvement project for cameras and for intercoms because of their age. And I don't mean to kind of digress, but what we have to do is actually stage each piece, each floor.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking the question I'm asking.
And for this project, in conjunction with the other three, this won't probably take us 18 months as we start the process.
No kidding.
Because we have to work with 3 other general contractors to do other pieces.
Are you going to have inmates carrying this stuff out?
No.
So just as long as they don't get a hold of any of this material. No,
No, we completely evacuate or vacate a floor, and then we, work on it.
All right,
they're
fair
not
enough.
in the unit at all.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, we have items 6A and 6B. 6A is the transfer from the general fund to the capital fund. Is there a motion to move that to finance? Moved by Lucido. Is there support? Support by Sauger. Please vote on your iPad, and this is just moving it to the Finance Committee. And the vote was unanimous on that. Item 6B is the actual contract. Is there a motion to move that to the Finance Committee? Please vote on your iPad. Moved by Lucido, supported by Brown. Please vote on your iPads. And that also unanimously passes. The next item on the agenda is 6C, the contract extension with BJL Enterprise. And Vicki Wolber is here to speak on that.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. In front of you, you have a contract extension for the person that provides planning services to our UASI board. The UASI board is representative of 6 counties in the city of Detroit that oversees our Homeland Security funding. So it's a 1-year contract extension, which is standard. We do it for 1 year to make sure that we still need the services and that we have the grant funding in place. The contract is for $104,232.
Moved by Commissioner Carabelli. Is there support? Support by Lucido. Is there any discussion or any questions on this? Commissioner Drolet.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for that report. Just to make sure I understand it properly, this is a continuation that is funded by a grant from the federal government?
Correct, yes.
So there's no cost to the county beyond what, no budgetary change?
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? There's a motion and support. Please vote on your iPads. And this, again, is to move it to the Finance Committee. The vote is unanimous. Thank you, Vicki.
Great, thank you.
Item number 7 is a presentation, the Civil Service Commission Annual Report, and we have a Civil Service Commissioner here to present this.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Ron Geml. I am a retired lieutenant from the Macomb County Sheriff's Office and one of 3 members of the current Civil Service Board. With me is Shirley Maniaci. She's our secretary, and she was put this year-end report together. I had a chance to look it over. I hope that you guys did too. I found it very informative and very complete, and we just wanted to make sure that you guys all had a copy of it.
Motion to receive and file? Moved by Carabelli, supported by Myjack. Any discussion on this? I don't have anything. Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Brown?
Thank you. In the past, we heard concerns about the civil service, the backlog of getting qualified applicants into the sheriff's department. How are we with that? Has there been progress made on that front?
Chief of Staff, Captain Roberts just informed me with some of the dealings between you and the Sheriff's Department, things are progressing a lot better than they have been in the past.
Do you have any information what areas how those improvements have been made?
We've increased or decreased the time in between testing for dispatchers, have made it to get the applications submitted on a proper time, and that's pretty much all I know.
Okay. How many applicants in the mill now?
Currently, dispatch, we have 79 as of this morning, and corrections deputies, we have 251.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for coming up. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Are there any other questions or speakers on this? Commissioner Sauger?
Thank you, Commissioner.
We already did the motion, right? There's a motion and support on the floor. Please vote on your iPad to receive and file. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Item number 8 is correspondence. That's in the packet, though, correct? Is there a motion to receive and file? Moved by Carabelli, supported by Sauger. Commissioner Carabelli, you wish to speak on it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was wondering if any of the staff did the research to see what we are charging in our county for this.
You mean for our,
The 911, it says we're up to 42 cents. Do you know what our current?
we don't charge anything in Macomb County.
So we don't charge anything, but we're allowed to charge up to 42 cents to help with dispatch in the communities? And we don't charge anything? Because I thought we did charge something.
No.
No? Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought we, okay, thank you.
Chair Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll look into that. I thought we charged 19 cents, something like that, and then we could go up to 42. We'll look into that, and that was something that we discussed before, why we're one of the only counties that does not, put that fee on the cell phone towers, on the cell phone usage. That conversation was going on a while back, and then we kind of lost track of it. So we'll get that back on the forefront to at least see what's the reasons behind what we're doing and if we should change it. Thanks.
There is a motion and support. Please vote on your iPad. Item number 9 is new business. Is there any new business for the committee? Item number 10 is public participation. Seeing no members of the public, will close that. And is there a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn. Is there support? Commissioner Leonetti, please vote on your iPad.
Never.
Thank you, we're adjourned.